Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel When Love Betrays. It's funny how a dream can have a physical taste. For me, for the last 4 years of high school, my dream tasted like the stale, recycled air of the school library and the bitter coffee I'd drink to stay up all night studying. It was the taste of possibility. Here, in Northwood, a town painted in 50 shades of beige, possibility was a foreign currency, and I was broke. Our town was a place where people didn't leave. They inherited their parents' houses, their parents' jobs at the local mill, and their parents' quiet, simmering disappointment. My dad left when I was 6, not for a better life, but for a different one 2 towns over, leaving my mom and me to become a tiny, fiercely knit unit of 2. My mom, Carol, was my world. She worked 2 jobs, as a waitress at the local diner and cleaning offices at night, all to keep our small rented house afloat. Her hands were always chapped, and her face was perpetually tired. But she never complained. Everything she did, she said, was for me. "You're going to be the one who gets out, Alex," she'd tell me, massaging my shoulders as I hunched over a textbook. "You're going to show them all." She was my biggest cheerleader, my confidant, my entire support system. And the out had a name, the Sterling Grant. It wasn't just a scholarship. It was a golden ticket, a full ride to a prestigious university on the West Coast, a world of sun and science and oceans that I'd only ever seen in pictures. It was everything Northwood wasn't. Getting that grant became our shared obsession. We spent weeks on the application. She'd read my essays, her brow furrowed in concentration, suggesting a different word here, a stronger sentence there. When I finally hit submit, we held each other in the dim light of my desk lamp and cried. It felt like we, as a team, had just launched a rocket into space. Then came the waiting. 3 months of it. It was a special kind of torture. Every day I'd come home from school, and my first act, before even taking off my shoes, was to refresh my email. Inbox, spam, promotions, nothing. The sound of the mail truck coming down our street made my heart hammer against my ribs. I'd watch through the window as the mailman put the letters in our box, and I'd hold my breath until I had the small stack in my hands, sifting through bills and junk mail for a thick, important-looking envelope. Mom would watch me, her face a mask of anxious sympathy. "Any news, honey?" she'd ask, and I'd just shake my head, the familiar knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The decision was due on April 15th. The day came and went. Nothing. Then the 16th, the 17th. With each passing day, my rocket of hope began to fall back to earth, burning up on re-entry. I started to accept the inevitable. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe my dream was just that, a dream. It was a Tuesday, almost 2 weeks after the deadline, when it happened. I'd already given up. I was in my room, staring at the ceiling, making a mental list of all the ways my life was now destined to suck, when my mom knocked softly on the door. "Alex?" The email came. I shot up, my body electric with a sudden, painful jolt of hope. I scrambled to my desk, my mouse hand trembling as I clicked open my inbox. There it was, an email from the Sterling Grant Foundation. My breath hitched. This was it, the moment that would define the rest of my life. I clicked it open. "Dear Mr. Alex Finch," it began, "thank you for your interest in the Sterling Grant. We received an unprecedented number of highly qualified applicants this year." I didn't need to read any further. Every rejection letter in history starts with that exact same sentence. The words blurred. The air in my lungs turned to cement. It was over. The rocket hadn't just burned up. It had never even left the launch pad. A sob, raw and ugly, tore its way out of my chest. My screen went blurry with tears. The summer that followed was a blur of gray. While my classmates were posting photos from their college orientations, sprawling green lawns, new friends, brick-faced dorms, I was learning how to perfectly stack cans of beans at the Piggly Wiggly grocery store. My world had shrunk to the 4-aisle prison of canned goods and international foods. Every beep of the cash register sounded like a countdown to the end of my life. My mom insisted I enroll at Northwood Community College. "Just for a year, Alex," she'd reasoned, her voice bright and constructive. "You can get your core credits out of the way, save some money, and reapply for the Sterling next year. It's a smart plan. It felt like the dumbest plan in the world, but I didn't have the energy to argue. So my days became a monotonous cycle. A morning class on basic algebra I could have taught myself, followed by an 8-hour shift of stocking shelves and telling people where the pickles were. I was living in a ghost version of my own life. Food tasted like cardboard. Music was just noise. I'd come home, my body aching and my soul numb, and collapse on my bed. The weirdest part was my mom. As I sank deeper into my depression, she seemed to blossom. Her perpetual exhaustion was replaced by a strange, vibrant energy. She started humming while she made breakfast. She was always suggesting things, "Let's go for a drive," or "Let's rent a movie like we used to." Her attempts at cheerfulness felt frantic, almost desperate, and they grated on my raw nerves. Every time she said, "Isn't this nice? Just the two of us having a quiet evening?" a cold, ugly feeling would squirm in my gut. It was nice for her. For me, it was a prison sentence. Then the little oddities began, like pebbles in my shoe that I kept trying to ignore. The first was the mail. For years, I was the one who got the mail. It was my ritual, my daily shot of hope or disappointment. But after the rejection, she started getting to it first. I'd come home from my shift, and the mail would already be on the kitchen counter, usually with the junk mail already separated. The first time I tried to grab it from the box myself, she practically ran out the front door. "Oh, I'll get it, honey. No need for you to bother," she'd called out, her smile a little too wide, a little too bright. When I mentioned it, she just brushed it off. "I'm just trying to help, Alex. You've got enough on your plate." Then came the money. We had always lived on a razor's edge financially. I knew exactly how much every bill was, exactly what we could and couldn't afford. But a few months into the fall, new things started appearing. First, it was a new TV, a big one, flat-screened and sleek. It was a floor model, practically a steal, she announced one evening. A week later, she came home smelling of expensive perfume, not the cheap body spray she usually wore. Then it was a new leather jacket for herself. I finally asked her about it. "Where's all this money coming from, Mom?" The question was innocent, but her reaction wasn't. For a split second, a flash of pure panic crossed her face before being instantly replaced with a look of wounded pride. "I've been picking up extra cleaning shifts at the law firm, if you must know," she said, her tone sharp. "I got a small raise. I thought we deserved something nice for once after everything." She made me feel guilty for even asking, as if I was accusing her of something, and I believed her. Or rather, I forced myself to believe her, because what was the alternative? That she had a secret benefactor? That she'd won the lottery and not told me? It made no sense. My mind was so clouded by my own failure, my own grief for the life I'd lost, that I couldn't see the pieces for what they were. I saw a loving mother trying to cheer up her depressed son, a hard-working woman rewarding herself for once. I saw all the things she wanted me to see. The lie held together for 3 more months, a fragile sheet of ice over a dark, deep lake. I skated on it carefully, convincing myself the strange, creaking sounds beneath my feet were just my imagination. The catalyst that finally shattered it all came, as these things often do, during a holiday. It was Thanksgiving, and my mom's sister, my Aunt Judy, had driven down from a few states over. Aunt Judy is one of those people who operates at a perpetually high volume, all loud floral print shirts and clanking jewelry. She talks more than she listens, which is probably why my mom's lie had survived this long. We were all sitting in the living room, bloated with turkey and pie, the TV droning on about some football game. I was half asleep, trying to pretend I was anywhere else. "So, Alex," Judy boomed from her armchair, making me jump. "Your mom tells me you're at the community college. Just getting some credits before the big move, huh?" I blinked, confused by the question. "The big move?" "To California," she said, gesturing with a half-eaten cookie, "for the grant. Honestly, Carol, I was so mad you didn't throw a party for him. I saw the acceptance packet you got back in the spring when I visited, the one with that fancy university logo on it. I told my whole book club about my brilliant nephew." The air in the room suddenly became thick and heavy. I could feel my own blood pounding in my ears, drowning out the sound of the TV. I stared at my aunt, then slowly turned my head to look at my mother. It was like watching a mask crack and fall away. For a split second, I saw raw, undiluted terror in her eyes. It was a look I had never seen on her face before, and it shocked me to my core. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a tight, brittle smile. "Judy, for heaven's sake, what are you talking about?" Mom's laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. "You've completely mixed things up. Alex didn't get the grant. Remember? We were all so heartbroken about it." She shot a look at Judy, a look that was both a plea and a threat. Aunt Judy frowned, her cookie halfway to her mouth. "Mixed up? No, I don't think so, Carol. You showed it to me yourself. It was a big, thick envelope. You were beaming. You said you were so proud, but so scared to see him go so far away. You're mistaken," my mom snapped, her voice suddenly sharp and cold. She stood up abruptly, starting to gather empty plates with shaking hands. "It must have been someone else you're thinking of. One of your book club ladies' grandsons, perhaps. Your memory isn't what it used to be. Now, who wants more coffee?" The change of subject was so violent, so aggressive, it was like a slap in the face. Aunt Judy just sat there, her mouth slightly open, looking stunned and offended. The happy holiday atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by a humming, unbearable tension. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I just sat there, frozen on the couch, watching my mother practically flee to the kitchen. The rest of the evening was a painful charade. We all pretended that conversation never happened, but I couldn't stop replaying it. I could see my aunt's genuinely confused face, and I could see the pure animal panic in my mother's eyes. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. This wasn't a case of my aunt's bad memory. The way my mother had reacted, it wasn't the reaction of someone correcting a simple mistake. It was the reaction of someone whose carefully constructed world was about to be set on fire. Later that night, long after my aunt had left, I lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling. All the little oddities of the past few months began to click into place. The frantic cheerfulness, the secrecy with the mail, the new TV, the expensive perfume. They weren't pebbles in my shoe anymore. They were pieces of a puzzle, and they were forming a picture so monstrous, so unthinkable, that my mind refused to fully accept it. But the seed was planted, a cold, hard seed of doubt that was already beginning to sprout roots in the pit of my stomach. And one phrase from my aunt echoed in my mind over and over again. She showed me the letter. Sleep became a stranger to me after that Thanksgiving. For 2 days, I walked around my own house like a ghost, the conversation with my aunt playing on a relentless loop in my head. She showed me the acceptance packet. You were beaming. Every time I looked at my mom, I felt a nauseating wave of suspicion. She acted as if nothing had happened, humming in the kitchen, asking about my day at the Piggly Wiggly. But her cheerfulness now seemed sinister. It was a performance, and I was suddenly the only one in the audience who knew it. I needed to see the proof that I was wrong. I needed to see that rejection email again, to read the cold, corporate words, and reassure myself that I was the one going crazy, not her. I spent hours scouring my email account. I checked the trash folder, the archived folder, every conceivable place it could be. Nothing. It was gone. I remembered, with a sickening lurch, that we had read it on her laptop, not mine. I found her in the living room, watching TV. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Mom, do you remember that rejection email from the Sterling grant? I wanted to, I don't know, look at it again, see if there was any feedback." She didn't even look away from the screen. "Oh, honey, I deleted that ages ago, right after it came. Why on earth would I keep something so hurtful? We needed to move on." She said it so casually, as if she were talking about throwing out expired milk. But her knuckles were white, where she gripped the remote control. That was it. That was the moment my doubt hardened into certainty. You don't delete the most important email of your son's life, no matter how painful, without a second thought. You don't erase the evidence. The lie was no longer a possibility. It was a living, breathing thing in the room with us. I took a deep breath, the air feeling thin and sharp. Aunt Judy was very specific, Mom. She finally turned to me, her face unreadable. "We've been over this, Alex. Your aunt is a lovely woman, but she gets confused. She said she saw the packet." I pushed, my voice trembling slightly. "She said you were proud. That doesn't sound like confusion. It sounds like a memory." A switch flipped. Her calm demeanor vanished, replaced by a ferocious defensiveness. "Are you really doing this? Are you calling your own mother a liar based on a rambling comment from your aunt?" She stood up, her voice rising. "After everything I do for you, I work my fingers to the bone so you can live here, so you can eat, and this is the thanks I get? You're concocting these fantasies because you're disappointed? It's sick, Alex." The word fantasies struck me like a physical blow. She was turning it all on me. "It's not a fantasy. The missing email, the new TV, the money you suddenly have, the money I earned by working overtime," she shrieked, her face turning red, "so I could try to make life a little less miserable for my ungrateful son. Is that what this is about? You think I stole from you?" Tears were welling in her eyes, and for a horrible second, I almost believed her. Her pain looked so real. This was my mom. The woman who held me when I was sick. The woman who believed in me more than anyone. Was I a monster for accusing her? "I don't know what I think," I whispered, my resolve crumbling. She saw her advantage and pressed it. She came closer, her voice softening into a tone of deep, theatrical hurt. "I would never ever hurt you, Alex. You are my entire world. It breaks my heart that you would think I was capable of something so evil. This bitterness is poisoning you. You have to let it go." She tried to hug me, but I flinched and took a step back. That single, involuntary movement hung in the air between us. Her face hardened again. The tears vanished. The argument was over, but a war had just begun. She turned her back on me and walked out of the room, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence. I stood there for a long time, my body shaking. The confrontation had solved nothing and destroyed everything. She hadn't just denied it. She had tried to make me believe I was losing my mind. And in that moment, I knew with chilling certainty that I couldn't trust a single word she said. I couldn't get the truth from her. If I wanted to find it, I would have to do it myself. I would have to find the one thing she couldn't lie about, the acceptance packet itself. And I had a sickening feeling I knew exactly where I had to look. The next day was the longest of my life. I went to my classes at the community college and my shift at the Piggly Wiggly in a fog, my mind miles away, plotting. I knew my mother's schedule by heart. She had her night cleaning shift at the law firm from 7 p.m. until midnight. That was my window. The thought of what I was about to do made me feel physically ill, like I was about to commit a terrible crime. In a way, I was. I was about to deliberately shatter the last remaining fragments of trust I had in my own mother. When I got home, she was already getting ready to leave. She avoided my eyes, the air between us thick with the unspoken anger of last night's fight. "There's leftover lasagna in the fridge," she said, her voice flat as she grabbed her coat. "Don't wait up." The front door clicked shut behind her, and the silence that followed was deafening. The house was mine. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. For a moment, I considered just letting it go, just living with the doubt, accepting the lie, because the truth felt like it would be 1,000 times more destructive. But I couldn't. I had to know. I walked to her bedroom door and stood before it for a full minute, my hand hovering over the doorknob. This was her space, her sanctuary, a place I hadn't entered without permission since I was a little kid. Taking a deep, ragged breath, I turned the knob and stepped inside. Her room smelled of her perfume and laundry detergent. It was neat and tidy, just like her. I started with the obvious places, my hands shaking so badly I could barely function. I checked her nightstand drawers. Nothing but reading glasses and hand cream. I looked under her bed, just dust bunnies and a misplaced slipper. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was the paranoid, ungrateful son she'd accused me of being. My eyes fell on her closet. It was a simple closet with a single sliding door. I pulled it open. Her clothes were neatly hung, shoes arranged in a perfect row on the floor. It all looked normal, but my gaze drifted upwards to the top shelf. It was packed with old blankets, hat boxes, and things she rarely used, and tucked away behind a stack of old towels, almost completely hidden, was a shoebox. It was for a brand of shoes she'd never worn in her life. My breath caught in my throat. I dragged a chair over and climbed onto it, my legs unsteady. I reached for the box. It was light, and a fine layer of dust coated the lid. I got down from the chair and sat on the edge of her bed, the box on my lap. This was it, the point of no return. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. The first thing I saw was a thick, cream-colored envelope. The university's crest was embossed in the top left corner, elegant and official. I pulled it out. My name and address were typed perfectly on the front. I slid a finger under the flap and pulled out the letter inside. The paper was heavy and expensive. "Dear Mr. Alistair Finch," I read, my vision blurring. "On behalf of the admissions committee at West Coast University, it is my great pleasure to offer you admission to the College of Engineering for the fall semester." My mind went completely blank. I just stared at the words I had spent years dreaming of reading. They weren't a fantasy. They were real. They were right here, in my hands. Beneath the letter was another document, this one with "The Sterling Grant Foundation" printed on the letterhead. It detailed the terms of the award: full tuition, room and board, a generous stipend for books and living expenses. It was all there, a full ride, a golden ticket. Underneath that were glossy brochures filled with pictures of a life that was supposed to be mine. A sun-drenched campus, students laughing on green lawns, state-of-the-art laboratories. It was a ghost of a future I never knew I had. And then at the very bottom of the box was the final, most brutal piece of the puzzle. It was a stack of bank receipts, 4 of them, one for each of the past 4 months. They were withdrawal slips, and on the memo line of each one a single damning word was written in my mother's familiar, neat handwriting: stipend. I dropped the papers. They fluttered to the floor around my feet like dead leaves. The air left my lungs in a silent gasp. It wasn't just that she had hidden the letter. It wasn't just that she had lied. She had been actively stealing from me, stealing the money that was supposed to buy my freedom, and using it to buy herself a new TV, a new jacket, a new perfume. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there on the edge of her bed, in the quiet of her room, surrounded by the wreckage of my life. The woman who had done this wasn't my mother. My mother was my biggest cheerleader, my rock, my hero. This person, this stranger who had meticulously and methodically dismantled my future while pretending to comfort me, was someone I didn't know at all. And the silence in the house was no longer empty. It was filled with the deafening sound of my own heart breaking. I don't know how long I sat there on her bed, surrounded by the paper ghosts of my stolen future. An hour? 2? Time had ceased to have any meaning. The initial shock had receded, leaving behind something cold and hard and heavy in my chest. I carefully gathered the documents: the letter, the grant award, the glossy brochures, and the damning bank receipts. I walked out to the kitchen and laid them on the table, arranging them in a neat, undeniable row under the harsh glare of the overhead light. I didn't hide them. I wanted her to see them the second she walked in the door. Then I sat down in one of the kitchen chairs and waited. Midnight came and went. I heard her car pull into the driveway. I heard the familiar jingle of her keys, the sound of the key sliding into the lock. The door opened, and she walked in, sighing with the weariness of a long shift. "Alex, you're still up?" she started to say. Then she saw me, and she saw what was on the table. Every ounce of color drained from her face. Her purse slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stared at the papers, her eyes wide with a horror that eclipsed anything I had seen before. There was no room for denial now. There were no more lies to tell. The evidence of her betrayal was laid out like a funeral offering on our kitchen table. She didn't look at me. She couldn't. She just stared at the letter, her hand fluttering to her throat. She sank into the chair opposite me, her body seeming to collapse in on itself. A terrible, ragged sob tore from her chest, and she buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. I didn't say anything. I just watched, my heart a cold, dead stone in my chest. After what felt like an eternity, she finally looked up, her face streaked with tears and mascara, her expression completely broken. "When your father left," she whispered, her voice barely audible, raw and ragged, "you were all I had left. You were this tiny little thing, and you needed me for everything. And for 18 years, that was my life, being your mom. It was the only thing I was ever good at. It was the only thing that mattered." She took a shaky breath, her eyes pleading with me, begging for an understanding I couldn't give. "I knew you were smart, Alex. I was so proud of you. But when we sent that application, I started having nightmares. Nightmares of this house, empty, silent. You were supposed to go off and have this big, amazing life, and I was supposed to, what? Just stay here? Grow old waitressing at the diner? Be that lonely woman whose son never calls?" Her confession poured out of her in a pathetic, desperate flood. "When the acceptance letter came, I was so happy for you, for a second. And then this terror washed over me. It felt like a countdown to the end of my life. I saw myself completely alone, and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. I told myself it was for you, that the world was a dangerous place, that you weren't ready, that you'd be happier here, with me, where you were safe. I told myself that lie so many times that I started to believe it." She gestured helplessly at the bank receipts. "The money, I don't even know. It was like it wasn't real. I took it out and I thought if I could just make our life here a little better, if I bought a new TV, if we had nice things, maybe you would be happy. And if you were happy, then it wouldn't be a lie. It would be okay. It was so stupid. God, I know how stupid it sounds." She was sobbing openly now, her words choked and fractured. "I didn't want to lose you, Alex. You're my whole world. I just didn't want to be alone. I listened to every word, and I felt nothing. No pity, no sympathy. The anger had burned away, leaving only a vast, empty wasteland behind. I was looking at a stranger, a weak, terrified, selfish stranger who had loved her fear more than she had loved her own son. She hadn't been protecting me. She had been preserving her cage, and she had pulled me back inside it just as I was about to fly free. She was waiting for me to yell, to scream, to forgive her. I did none of those things. I just stood up, the legs of my chair scraping loudly against the linoleum floor. "You weren't losing me, Mom," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You had already lost me. You just decided to steal my future so you wouldn't have to notice." I left my mother crying at the kitchen table. I went into my room and shut the door, but I couldn't block out the sound of her grief. It was a terrible, wrenching sound, but it felt like it was coming from a million miles away. It had nothing to do with me anymore. My own grief was silent, a vast and crushing pressure in my chest. I sat on my bed and waited for the sun to rise. The next morning, driven by a sliver of irrational hope so small it was almost insulting, I made the phone call. I found the number for the admissions office in the welcome packet. My voice was a monotone, a robot reciting a script. I explained that there had been a family emergency and that my acceptance notification had been misplaced. The woman on the other end of the line was polite, professional, and utterly indifferent. Her name was Brenda. I'll never forget it. She clicked on her keyboard for a moment. "Ah, yes, Mr. Finch. I see your file. You were a recipient of the Sterling Grant. Congratulations on that. It's a tremendous honor." The past tense was a knife twisting in my gut. "Unfortunately," she continued, her voice infused with practiced sympathy, "the deadline to accept the offer of admission was June 1st. When we didn't hear from you, the grant was transferred to an alternate candidate. The spot has been filled. There's nothing we can do at this stage." "There's no one I can talk to?" I asked, my voice cracking for the first time. "I'm sorry, sir. The process is final. You are, of course, welcome to reapply for next year's admission cycle." I hung up the phone. That was it. The final door had been slammed shut and locked. My dream wasn't just stolen anymore. It was officially dead and buried. The days that followed were a waking nightmare. We lived in the same house, but it was a cold and silent tomb. My mother would try to speak to me, her eyes red-rimmed and pleading. She would make my favorite foods and leave them outside my bedroom door, where they would grow cold. I never answered her. I never touched the food. I couldn't even look at her. When I saw her, I didn't see my mother. I saw a stranger, a thief. Her presence was a constant, suffocating reminder of everything I had lost. She had been so terrified of the silence in an empty house, and in her desperation, she had created a silence between us that was 1,000 times more profound. One afternoon, I was staring out my bedroom window at the same boring street in the same beige town, and the full, crushing weight of the irony hit me. She had won. I was still here. I wasn't in California. I was sleeping in my old bed, working at the Piggly Wiggly, trapped in Northwood. She had gotten exactly what she wanted. But she had also destroyed the very thing she was trying to keep. The son who loved her, the boy who called her his best friend, was gone forever. And in his place was a hollowed-out stranger who couldn't bear to be in the same room as her. I knew then that I couldn't stay. Her fear of me leaving had become the very reason I had to. That night, I pulled an old duffel bag from the back of my closet. I packed methodically, silently. A few pairs of jeans, some t-shirts, my toothbrush, the small wad of cash I'd saved from my job. I looked at the photos on my desk, the pictures of a smiling boy with his loving mother. They looked like strangers from a different lifetime. I left them all behind. With the bag slung over my shoulder, I walked out of my room. She was on the couch pretending to watch TV, but I knew she had been waiting. She saw the bag, and a small wounded sound escaped her lips. She stood up. "Alex, please," she whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't look back. I just walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped outside, pulling it shut softly behind me. The night air was cool on my face. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a destination. My golden ticket had been cashed by someone else. I wasn't heading towards a future of sunshine and science. I was just walking away from the ruins of my past. I put my hands in my pockets and started down the dark, familiar street, heading nowhere in particular, with the chilling, absolute certainty that for the first time in my life, I was completely and utterly alone.